Hi, this is Dr. Dan Ratner, and I am here with Sarah, one of my patients from 5 or 6 years ago, and we're going to hear her story of getting better, and it's a really emotional one for her and for me, and I look forward to talking to her. Sarah, I am so pleased to have you on the show. You are someone who worked with me way back when. It feels like a long time ago, but it also feels like a short time ago. But I'm so glad to have you here, and really want to give you a chance to tell your story because it's going to be so beneficial to so many people out there. So maybe we can start with when did the pain start? Let's go back to the beginning.
Okay. I also want to thank you for having me, because if it weren't for listening to other people share their success stories, I wouldn't be here today. So the possibility that maybe I could help someone means a lot. So I started having back pain when I was in 5th grade. I was around 11 years old. Mm-hmm. And then I pretty much had back pain almost every day for 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's I mean, one thing I love about having people on is the different kind of experiences. I mean, back pain for 25 years, all the way back to when you were 11. Mm-hmm. As you know, I work with doubt, and the amount of doubt you would have had coming into my office would have been pretty staggering. And I think we talked about it at the time, but tell me what you remember about that.
Related to doubt, I mean, what I will say is that I thought I was an expert on back pain. So I had a lot of pain and a lot of arrogance. It's not a good combination. And so, I remember at some point in my 20s meeting one of my, it was like a wife of one of my colleagues, and she had back pain. I was like, well, I can send you some things that I've learned over the years. I mean, I was trying to be helpful. I came from a great place. Right. And it was like, sleep in this position and wear these kind of shoes, blah, 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 blah. And so it was really hard for me to change my perspective when I first learned about Dr. Sarno and psychosomatic syndromes, because I had been to literally dozens of specialists from the age of 11. It started with chiropractors, and then, physical therapists. I tried Rolfing, I tried acupuncture, and I'm sure there are many people who benefit from these types of things. For me, though, it was always temporary. If anything helped at all, like it would just be temporary, and then I would continue to have pain.
Yeah, I was thinking it might be a helpful distinction that you and I will both appreciate, that you were a back sufferer expert. You had expertise in back suffering.
Yes, I did.
But you didn't, and that made it, I think this was an added challenge for you to have had it for so long, to feel like, well, I know more about this than almost anybody could because of how long I've had it.
Yes.
So,
and also, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, you.
Well, I was going to say, until I met a couple people, which I'll tell you about in a moment, who had benefited from learning about Dr. Sarno and his approach, I had never met anyone who said, oh, I used to have back problems. I always thought that the goal was to manage my back problems and to just live with it and find the best specialist I could find. I did have specialists who would say, like, well, I'm thinking about one person in particular. This was about 20 years ago. And this person referred to himself as the last stop, meaning after him, I would never need to do anything else.
Oh, okay.
So there were times where I thought, well, maybe this person will help me, or this person, which is exactly why I was skeptical of Dr. Sarno, because I thought no one could actually solve this problem.
Right. And that's an important thing to highlight. So many sufferers out there, just like you, they have a whole history of disappointments, and they have people who say they can help who don't. They have people who say they can't help, and that's also very disappointing and very upsetting. You have a whole, it's traumatic, actually, the whole experience. It certainly was for me. I had 8 years of it, but you had 25 of it, so that's even longer. And so now let's jump to when you found out about Sarno. I'm actually not recalling how that happened, so tell me.
Yeah, so I will say that in those 25 years, it was chronic. And then I had 3, what I would call acute episodes in my 30s. And with each acute episode, I actually walked with a cane. not the best picture of a woman in her 30s with a cane. And there was a way that I felt connected to like elderly people on the street in New York City, like, let's do a cane tap, but no one seemed to want to do that with me. And so I was walking with a cane, and I'm actually in a 12-step program, and that is part of my story. And that actually for me is part of why I was able to try something new with Dr. Sarno, because what I was doing with all these other specialists over a few decades, it wasn't working. And that was a form of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results. So with that said, I was at a 12-step meeting one day with my cane, and a woman came up to me after the meeting. She's probably about my mother's age, and she was very kind. I had known her for years, not well, but I knew her, in these 12-step meetings. And she said to me, just so you know, I used to have back pain, and if you're interested, I can tell you what helped. And again, this idea of I used to have back pain, that already seemed really foreign and bizarre to me. And in my mind, I was just rolling my eyes at this lady, because I said, like, oh, okay. I'll just play her game for a moment. Like, oh, so what helped? And she said, well, there's his name is Dr. Sarno. And I thought, okay, it's a doctor who helped her. Like, what could he possibly do? She's going to tell me she had surgery or something. And just so you know, I'd also been to like an orthopedic surgeon once to talk about that possibility. So she actually didn't go into detail. She just said something like, well, how about you look him up online? And if you have questions, you can ask me. And I thought,
wow,
what? Like, that was really strange. I will say that now, years later, with my experience with Dr. Sarno, I do find it is so hard to talk about with people who don't know about him and don't really believe in psychosomatic syndromes. And I think that maybe she was concerned that I would just be put off if she told me. But anyway, that was her approach. And I just sort of dismissed her in my mind.
Right.
And then about an hour later, I was in my apartment building. Again, this is when I was living in New York. And a woman who lived in my building, she invited me into her apartment. I was going to look at some shoes she had that I was thinking about getting. And again, I had my cane. And she said to me, just so you know, I used to have back problems. And she's my age, so that meant a little bit more to me.
Right.
And then she said, but now I'm able to go skydiving. That's not even of interest to me. So I was like, okay. And I said, oh, well, what helped? And she didn't just say Dr. Sarno's name. She went to her bookshelf and she said, this is the book that helped me. And something,
wow.
Yeah, I know. Something like sort of, I just felt moved in that moment to take this a little bit seriously. What are the chances that two people within an hour would say something? So I went upstairs to my apartment. I was lying on my bed again. This was during a pretty acute episode. I was crying on my bed. I called my mother and I said, listen, Mom, someone just gave me this book and I read the back of it. It looks like, excuse my language, it looks like pure crap. Mm-hmm. Because it really looks like it's someone who's telling me, it's in your head. And she said, don't read the book. It's going to make you think you're crazy. And I said, you're right. So I decided not to read the book. But what did I do, being a person of my generation? I was like, well, I'll Google him. And I started watching videos. And I watched a 2020 segment that came out, I guess, in the 90s about Dr. Sarno.
Uh-huh.
And I started looking into a few more things. And then I started reading reviews on Amazon. And I'm like, oh my God, who am I? I'm like looking on Amazon for someone to help me with back problems. I am smarter than this. I am more educated than this. But I started to really notice myself in not just what people were describing, but I did end up getting the book, The Divided Mind, where he doesn't just talk about back problems, but he talks about a whole host of issues, which I have struggled with. So I know we're talking about back stuff, but I also at the time was struggling with like chronic, now I call it bladder inflammation, because none of the specialists that I saw, I probably saw a dozen specialists for that. No one knew what it was. Well, they all had ideas of what it was. And so I just started to think through the history of a lot of problems that I had had that I always thought were physical. And basically, I ended up going to see Dr. Rashbaum, right, who's Dr. Sarno's predecessor. And then I saw you twice. And from what I recall, in the 2 times I met with you, because I already had a therapist, I was like an expert at self-reflection, but I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to give this a try. I just spent my 2 sessions being angry at you because I thought, who are you to tell me that you used to have back pain and now you don't? Like, I still didn't quite believe that. And I'm already a self-reflective person. Why is it that I need to do even more? But I remember there's something that you said to me. You said, one of many things, it's a leap of logic, not a leap of faith. And actually, you said that to me on the phone before we met, and that was one of the things that helped me to go in and see you. And that really helped me to think through, and it's sort of like a 12-step program, like writing an inventory about like, what's my history with, a certain issue, to write down my history and to think through, like you encouraged me to think through what were some of like the acute episodes that I had. Remember I said I had 3 at my 30s, not just what was going on in my life, but like, was there something even within 24 hours? And I started to think about it. And I remember with the second acute episode, someone who was very close to me was about to die. And I remember we got off the phone, and it was actually within 15 minutes. I thought I had, quote unquote, pulled my back out when I was arranging the furniture at the beginning of the school year for my students.
Right.
And then I was able to just see connections. I know I just answered your question in a very lengthy way, but that's a little bit perfect. About. Yeah.
I was going to guide you through all those steps anyway. So I was like, she's just moving on to the next one. This is beautiful. So,
yeah.
Well, let me jump in for a sec, because there were a couple things I heard in what you said that I wanted to highlight that are very important, I think, for people to hear about and kind of reflect on, but they also fit with me. So first of all, the past tense of back pain. The first time I heard that, I was like, what? Because my understanding was, based on what medicine had said and what people have said, was that people just have back pain forever.
Yes.
So that was one thing. Another thing that you said that I think was really important, among many other things, but just to highlight, the fact that this is not just back pain. This is about seeing the fullness of you. That grabbed me, and it sounds like it really did for you as well.
Yes. But the thing for me, the thing that happened with me is once my back pain started to, disappear, dissolve, I was able to then look at the stuff I had with bladders, with my bladder, with my sinuses, and I could go down a whole list, and those started to go away too. And that's what was sort of phenomenal.
Right. So what we're seeing in your story is you had a lot of reason to be skeptical. You had a lot of reason to be resistant. You also had reason to be angry. I don't, like, when you were seeing me and you were mad, I wasn't bothered at all by it, except that I was like, oh no, I need to get her help. And so I need to get in there somehow. That was the only thing that was at all a concern for me, was that I needed to stay in a good place with you so that I could be helpful to you.
Yeah.
So that was...
Sure.
Yeah,
I remember you were very kind and very patient.
And so so what happened after the 2 sessions? It's been a while. Can you remind me what you remember?
So the thing about sort of my relationship with you is that it wasn't just those 2 times of seeing you in person. It was that phone call initially that helped me to actually get in and see you, because you were so kind, and you spent, I think, an hour with me on the phone before going in. But then we emailed many times after. I think there were emails, and I saved things on Google Docs, because saving it through my email account doesn't help me as much. But I saved emails from you because I would say, I don't really know. What do you think? Should I go and try swimming again? Because I had stopped swimming. I used to say, I remember when I would say to people pre-Dr. Sarno, I'm sort of like old person in a young person's body, or is it a young person, old person's body? Yeah, in the sense that the only things I'll do, like activity wise, are things that older people do. So I will walk and I will swim. But when I had these acute episodes, I couldn't even swim. And so we would email about it, and you would encourage me to sort of trust myself and give it a try. But if it was still, if I was still in this acute place, like there's no need to rush it. And so those types of emails really helped me. And I just remember, oh gosh, I watched one of the videos of Dr. Sarno, and I would watch it over and over. This is when it was on YouTube. And I know that sometimes they'll take it off YouTube and then they'll put it back.
Right.
And I think it's like an hour and a half. And I would spend time, I would watch it. Sometimes I would just listen to it in the background. And I would try to honestly get in touch with my anger. I think a lot of my psychosomatic stuff is about fear, but I know he writes a lot about anger. There are a range of emotions. But when I would bend down, because that was where I would have like all this fear that I was going to hurt my back, I would just think, I'm angry. And for me, just to share a little bit more about my story and the emotional part, a lot of my anger / fear had to do with my really wanting to be married with children by the time I was like in my late 20s, and already, by now I'm a single mother by choice. And so I did have my daughter last year. But I just spent so much of my adult life being angry and fearful around that. And so just back to like that first acute episode, it was when I turned 30, and I was devastated, absolutely devastated that I was 30 years old and single and not a mom. And so learning about Dr. Sarno and reading, especially The Divided Mind, and thinking about my experiences and the way that I think about the world and my place in the world, I was like, okay, this is very emotional for me. And to be clear, I always believed that my emotions played a part in the health issues that I had.
Right.
There's such a difference between thinking that, oh, these health issues are being exacerbated by emotions versus they are caused by my emotions. And that's where, like, the people that I know, friends and family who have a whole host of health issues, they also believe that health issues are, physical stuff is exacerbated by emotional stuff. But the idea that it's caused by it, that's where that's why my life is different now. Yeah. Because I believe that. And I've experienced it. It's not actually just a belief. It's my experience.
No, you have a very different experience. And so you're highlighting some very important things, included in it. And I'm really grateful to you for doing this. Every time I interview somebody, they highlight something different that I can kind of show off to the audience about how important it is. And one of the things that you're saying that's so important is that crucial difference. You laid it out beautifully, so I don't need to restate it, but the difference between feeling that it's exacerbated by emotion versus actually it is the central cause, and it's different. And we've kept in touch over the years, partly because if you have a flare-up, you contact me, and then I will remind you of things or just be reassuring, or well, hopefully I'm doing things that are useful to you.
Yes, you are.
But from my vantage point, and I know much less about this than you do, so please tell me if I'm wrong about this, but you seem much happier, just generally.
Well, probably compared to when we met those 2 times. I mean, I remember sitting on the couch. I couldn't quite sit when I would, I would just like, he has no idea what kind of pain I'm in. I thought no one understood me. And actually the comments that I used to make about my back, now I try to think about what does that mean at a larger scale? Like when I say he doesn't understand my pain, maybe that was like the way that I felt about just people in general, like no one understands my pain. So now I try to think about what does that mean about my emotional experience in life, not related to the physical part. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And actually, that's another great point. It's because your physical experience with the symptoms does tend to mirror the emotional place in the world.
Yes, that's what I found. To say that I'm happier, I think So again, I've mentioned being in a 12-step program, and like a lot about 12-step programs is being of service to other people. So
Right.
I have a lot of energy and excitement and passion in talking to you right now because of the possibility that someone would benefit from what I have to say. And
Yeah.
that puts me in a good mood because there's a chance I'm being of service. Um, Also, because your role in my recovery means so much to me. And I haven't actually seen you face to face or through a screen in 5, 6 years.
Right.
That's really exciting for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, and to be, transparent, I struggle with anxiety. I struggle with depression sometimes. I have a therapist. I still have my 12-step program. Like, there's a lot of support I have in my life.
Yeah.
And I still have episodes, which, and that was the last time I reached out to you, and it was after my daughter was born. And it's like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? Especially as a single parent living during a pandemic. I can't pick up my daughter. How am I
Right.
going to do this? And working through that with you, and having you bring up the word doubt, and thinking, oh my gosh, maybe there is still a part of me that doubts that that psychosomatic syndromes and symptoms, like, that maybe I don't really believe in all of this, because the messages that I get from the world, from people who are closest to me, it doesn't support my experience and what we've talked about and what I've read in Dr. Sarno. Like, it's and so it can be hard even now,
Right.
to maintain sort of not just my perspective, but a sense of recovery around these issues.
These such good points, and actually, I want to back up because
Sure.
it was funny because the minute I said happier, I realized I was like, wait, and I've fallen into this trap many times. Not your trap. I mean the trap of just
Yeah.
the word happy, because what really is the case is that everything is moment to moment. We are constantly reworking ourselves and constantly sitting with what we're dealing with. So happy, I don't even think would be the right way of phrasing it. I think you do seem more at peace and more certain about some things, but
Mhm.
it's not. I feel bad because it's not even it's not my role to observe these things as if they're truth. I'm just telling you how I'm experiencing you, and it's a pleasure to see. But part of it might have been just how I imagine it, because when you were coming to see me, one thing was you wanted to have a kid, and now you do. And I know what it's like to be a parent and how meaningful it is, and you really wanted it, and you didn't think you were going to be able to, as I recall.
Yeah, actually, pre-Dr. Sarno, I was really concerned about being pregnant because I thought, how would my back handle the weight of pregnancy? And I was also really, it wasn't just pregnancy, but it was also labor and delivery. I just sort of imagined almost being paralyzed by it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if it weren't for this whole experience with Dr. Sarno, Dr. Rushman, with you, I probably wouldn't be here today with my daughter.
Well, this is one of the reasons I love doing this work. It's an honor to be able to do something, because I'm also about giving back. There were people who helped me way back in my childhood and other times, and it's very important to me to give back. And when I hear that I was part of that, making a difference, it's so wonderful. So I don't want you to feel pressure to feel happy, but happiness isn't even the goal. So that's why I realized when I said that word, I was like, actually, that's a mistaken word. What more is the case? It's you're moving forward in your life in a productive way. I don't even know what the right word is.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that part. I think about the word happy because in 12-step programs, people talk about being happy, joyous, and free. And I'm like, that's a lot of pressure. but I think about how, like, one of my goals is to be more serene. That's a pretty significant goal for someone like me who struggles with chronic anxiety.
Yeah.
So being more serene. But I will say, just related to what we're discussing more directly, like, I used to be very afraid of my body, very afraid of if I move in this way, if I do this, if I do that, if I don't do this, I'm going to be in pain. And I'm not as afraid of my body. I mean, I don't even know how I would say I'm afraid of my body at all anymore. I mean, I understand that I'm not invincible. I'm still a human being. I understand things can happen. And I also know that I can still have pain when I like unconsciously am not dealing with my life and the feelings that I have about my life and my place in this world and all of those things. Like it's not like I never have any emotional struggles or then psychosomatic struggles. I do, but when it happens, I mean, it's helpful to reach out to you. It's helpful to go back to my Google Doc. It's helpful to, I have Dr. Sarno's, actually, no, right now, someone is borrowing my book, Divided Mind. But when I'm struggling with something like upper respiratory, anything, I go through the Divided Mind and I just look through the parts that I've highlighted. And I've been doing that for years now.
Well, I was just thinking, I could talk to you about this for hours. I know you and I both are like, we're so excited about it.
Yeah,
I would like to do this again soon. You didn't realize it actually, but your dad appeared in the window back there.
Sorry about that.
No, this is great. These are all opportunities for us to just show life is just, it's messy and it's funny. I mean, I just didn't want you to know, to not know, because then you'd watch the video later and be like, what? That happened? So I'm always about full disclosure for you. So,
Thank you.
So I think we have a lot to still talk about. And one of the topics that I want to bring you back for, if you're up for it, is I want to talk more about what it's like to interface with the rest of the world once you're on the other side of it. Because I know that's been big for you, and it certainly was for me.
Yeah.
So why don't say a word or two about it, and we'll wrap up on that today, and then we'll pick up another time.
Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to 12-step programs for a moment, just because for me they're very connected.
Sure.
That I believe that sort of like the difference between being in a spiritual 12-step program and like living in a very materialistic society. It's very easy for me to get caught up in society and consumerism, blah, 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 you know, and that for me being in a 12-step program helps me to bring it back to, okay, how can I be the best version of myself for today? And that perspective, I'm not saying, I'm the only person like who has that. Like there are obviously a lot of people who are trying to lead like thoughtful, meaningful lives. But I guess I'm just bringing that up because I already feel like I'm part of something that not everybody understands or gets or respects, or agrees with. And so then knowing about psychosomatic syndromes and disorders, okay, so I guess I'm in the minority again of having that perspective. I feel that way about, again, I don't know if this is going to be helpful to people who are listening, but like as a feminist, my ideas about being a feminist or like an anti-racist activist, like not everyone's going to agree with me. It's not always the popular opinion. And I feel like what I've learned about Dr. Sarno, from reading his books, I watched the documentary, it was All the Rage. Like he was up against the entire medical industry. And so if he could do that, like that's really inspiring to me. I'm not saying that I'm a crusader because when I try to offer my perspective in a way where it seems like I'm pushing on people don't want to hear that. All I can do is offer like what's happened to me and who helped me and how it was helpful. That's all I can do.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the reasons I'm doing the podcast is to continue the conversation, to bring it to some more people, and to try to move the conversation nationally. And it's going to be slow. I don't anticipate that it won't be. So I would love to have you back on to talk about so much more of this. And it's so great to see you also. It's just been a long time.
Yeah.
And I have such fondness for you. It's part of how I work. I don't want to work with anybody that I can't connect with and be fond of. And I tend to connect with everybody in some way.
That's great.
But I found that when I met with you, even when you were really angry and stuff, I could so identify with you because I had been so angry. And so it was so easy to work with you. And it's just a pleasure. It's a pleasure to me to see you doing well and thriving in all kinds of ways. And the fact that you want to give back is so wonderful. So thank you for coming on, Sarah. And let's have you on again soon if you're willing to. I'd love to have you.
Yeah, I would be happy to. And I know I've said it many times, but I want to thank you again. You've been very responsive over the years when I've reached out, and in talking about this right now, when I'm saying, oh, I don't think that I would have a daughter, I wouldn't have been able to be pregnant if it weren't for everything that I've learned and having a new way of looking at my emotions and my body and the connection. Like I feel very emotional about it. So thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's very generous, and I'm happy to see you, and I look forward to more time with you.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, Sarah. Thanks for coming on.
Okay. Bye, Dan.
Bye. It's always a pleasure to have people on, whether I've seen them or not, and they've gotten better. It's a part of this work that we all in the mind-body community love to see. We really want everybody to get better, but obviously it's particularly moving when I play a personal role in it. And Sarah is someone who is very endearing to me for many reasons, but one of them is she was in such a dark hole when she first came to see me, and part of it was that anger and that feeling that she must have known so much about everything because she had suffered for 25 years. I don't blame her in the slightest for it. And she had also heard people say, I can help you, and then they didn't. And it's not that they weren't trying, but I just was very empathic to what she had been through. And then she was also describing being really just gut-wrenchingly upset about the idea that she wanted to have a kid but didn't know if she'd ever be able to with that back pain. And I had to strike the balance, as I talked about with her, between giving her hope but not sounding just outlandish. So the great thing about the work that we do, and something that Sarah highlighted worked, is we talk about science and logic. It's not about faith, and the logic piece really helped her. So it was really great to hear her story again and to think through what it's like for people. And you heard how every day she has to go through certain things, or had to anyway, and now continues to build off of that. But I will say this, there's another element that strikes me as really important, which is the kind of power that people do seem to gain in their lives, where they feel more in control and more at peace. I feel that with Sarah. But the other piece is the gratitude. And I understand why, because when I was suffering from back pain, the idea that somebody could take it away, if they could do it, I would be eternally grateful. And I am. And that's mostly to Sarno. But, Eric Sherman played a role. Some of the books that I read played a big role in settling some of my logical questions that I needed answered. And so I'm looking forward to having Sarah back on, because she also mentioned some really interesting stuff that I think would be good for everyone to see, including what's it going to be like after you've recovered, or maybe during the recovery. How do you deal with the outside world and all of these different thoughts that we hear about? So among the other things that we'll talk about when she's back, we're going to talk about that. But as you could see, this has been an emotional journey for her, and I connect to that emotional journey when I'm in it with that person. And it's a real triumph, I feel, to know that she is happy and free. Happy, we know, is a word that I went back and we had to revamp that. I just mean more capable of that happiness in so many different moments. She's got that kid that she wanted. She's not afraid of her body. And this is part of what can happen if people can be open to this perspective and learn about it. And I'm really proud of her and happy to have her on. So I hope that this was useful for you watching out there or listening. And if you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below, and I'll get back to you personally.